All right, welcome everyone to the ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. ICSS stands for the Institute for the Critical Study of Society. Our weekly programs are here online via Zoom every Sunday morning at 10:30 Pacific time, and you can sign up at our website, icssmarx.org, to receive weekly email announcements for the sessions. We'll start as usual with a presentation, and after a short break for announcement, we'll have a group discussion where you can express your views and ask questions. My name is Paulina Vasilyev. I'm standing in for fellow ICSS Program Committee member Roger Harris, who organized today's session, but unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. The session's titled U.S. Wages War on Venezuela. Venezuela Resists. Dropping any pretext of promoting democracy, the U.S. empire, the world's largest consumer of illegal narcotics and the leading money launderer to boot, is using the transparent pretext of counter-narcotics to root out the hemisphere's leading anti-imperialist challenger to U.S. hegemony. Venezuela is resisting and represents, in fact, the hope of an alternative to a U.S.-dominated world order. And reporting from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela will be our speaker, Jesús Rodríguez-Espinoza, an expert in international relations, Venezuelan politics, and communication. Jesús served for several years as Consul General of Venezuela in Chicago, and before that, he was part of the foundational editorial team of aporrea.org. He is the founder and editor of the English-language Venezuelan anti-imperialist news outlet, Orinoco Tribune. Jesús, welcome to ICSS Sunday morning at the Marxist Forum. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation, Compass. I'm not used to the methodology you use for these events, but what I'm planning to do is speak for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then allow you, if that's part of the methodology, to ask the questions that you need to ask. So I will start asking you, whom of you, 6 months ago, saw that Trump was going crazy when he began to talk about controlling Greenland, annexing Canada, changing the Gulf of Mexico name, regaining Panama, and putting military bases in Ecuador or the Antarctica in Argentina. At least for me, my response would be that I saw that he was running wild, crazy then. But now I realize that this is part of a bigger plan that is not designed, of course, by Trump. It's designed by the U.S. Ruling class, the capitalist class, the oligarchs in the U.S. that are the ones that really control the United States. And the plan they had is basically taking control of the hemisphere. And that happened because of the correlation of forces in the international scene has changed dramatically in recent years. I'm not saying that the U.S. in decline, it's always complicated to talk about U.S. decline because it never happens, the decline sometimes. And you begin frustrated waiting for the decline. But it is true that the U.S. is no longer the main war partner, global partner in many areas of the world, including Africa, including Asia, and even in Latin America. Right now, 30 years ago, the U.S. was the main trade partner for most of the countries in Latin America. And actually right now, it is only the main trade partner in Mexico and Colombia, because China has displaced a little bit the U.S. from that position. So I'm telling you this because in the opinion of many analysts, this is the geostrategic, geopolitical cause of what is happening right now in Venezuela. Basically, the U.S. is retreating and trying to take control, exercise full control of the territory that they consider their neighborhood, as Jetsek wrote a few days ago uh, uh, when he announced the latest, extrajudicial killing in the Caribbean. So they are trying to take control of the backyard, what they consider is the U.S. backyard, and of course, doing that, they are securing control of natural resources, and of course, Venezuela has many natural resources, but many other countries in the region also have humongous natural resources that are key to maintain the U.S. imperial economic apparatus. So, so, so Venezuela has the biggest oil reserve in the world, one of the biggest gold reserve in the world, and many, minerals that are very, desirable for the U.S. empire, and that's explain also what is happening around Venezuela and in the region in recent weeks. Mm, Additionally, the way I see it, there's another level in the geopolitical analysis, which is that Venezuela, along with Cuba and Nicaragua, represent bad example in the region. And they, of course, bad example between quotations. And they, of course, want to get rid of us because getting rid of us will make it easy for them to control the region. So for me, that's a very brief way to explain the geopolitical circumstances surrounding the recent U.S. aggression against Venezuela. So saying that, I just want to jump and talk to you about what we have in front of us right now here in Venezuela. I'm in Caracas right now. And basically we have 15,000 U.S. troops close to our borders. Uh, uh, Experts says that this is the biggest U.S. military deployment since the war in Iraq. And other people say that this is very similar to what happened during the invasion of Panama in '89. Of course, then the U.S. had already like 13 or 14,000 troops stationed in U.S. bases in Panama, so that helped them, launch the invasion of Panama then. Venezuela is bigger than Panama, sorry, and the features of our terrain are way more complicated than the terrain features in Panama. The ideologization of Venezuela is humongous if you compare it with the, ideologization and the anti-imperialist spirit of the Panamanians in the 80s. So I'm not saying that they were not, progressive anti-imperialist people in Panama then, but we in Venezuela has been living already for more than 25 years of Bolivarian revolution, and the anti-imperialist spirit in Venezuela is bigger than in many countries in the region. So that gives you a subjective perspective about the nature of the Venezuelan people and how strong we have decided to remain free and sovereign and independent. So that's basically the military build-up in terms of troops, in terms of weapons and war machines. We have the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier arriving a few days ago, last week actually, to the Caribbean. We have with that U.S. carrier, two more warship arrives to the region, and before the arrival of that flotilla, we already had like 8 warships in the region, a nuclear submarine, a flotilla of F-35 stationed in Puerto Rico, and with this U.S. aircraft carrier, uh, experts talk about like 70 something uh, uh, um, jet fighters that are based in that aircraft carrier. So we're talking about a humongous military buildup in front of Venezuela, and and what I'm going to say, what I want to say is that that military buildup is not going to be back home without showing strength, because it will politically be a disaster for Trump if he just decide tomorrow to, send those ships back to their bases. So they are gonna have to show something, to show peace through strength, the peace through strength slogan that is promoted, up there in the U.S. So taking that into consideration, and taking into consideration the number of troops that are stationed near us, one might understand that like a full military invasion is still not very viable, but uh, uh, military strike, decapitation strike, as you call it up there in the U.S., is a real possibility. And if you ask me, I believe that that is what the U.S. is planning to do. I believe that the U.S. is planning to launch airstrikes against military objectives in Venezuela, against narco-terrorists in Venezuela. And as you might know, the U.S. declared President Maduro the head of the Cartel de los Soles, that is an inexistent cartel, the head of Tren de Aragua, which is a criminal gang that doesn't have too much to do with drugs. And also they accuse him of being connected to the Mexican Sinaloa cartel. So all these things were said by the U.S. Justice Department in August, when they raised the bounty on President Maduro from $25 million to $50 million. Before, and in January, the U.S. government already increased the bounty on Maduro from $15 million. That was initially the initial, price on the head of Maduro, uh, 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 established during Trump's first term. Uh, and the Biden administration raised that bounty in January to $25 million. And then in August, they raised it to $50 million because mercenaries like Eric Prince and far-right Venezuelan politicians have been pushing for that to happen. They actually have been pushing for that bounty to be raised to $100 million. That's the sizable amount of money that mercenaries need to kill Maduro, to kidnap him, or whatever they want to do with him. One important thing that people in the U.S. should know is that killing Maduro won't end the Bolivarian Revolution, won't end Chavismo. Chavismo is bigger than Nicolás Maduro or Diosdado Cabello or our Vice President Jesús Rodríguez. I'm not saying that they are not important. I believe that they are key, but Chavismo is bigger than them. So executing this decapitation strike won't finish Chavismo, won't finish the Bolivarian Revolution. And but of course that could create some sort of destabilization in the country. But I believe that destabilization would have too much tracking, because the far right opposition in Venezuela is almost inexistent right now, despite what you might hear on there. The strength of Chavismo and the unity created because of the U.S. recent threat has galvanized somehow the anti-imperialist spirit of Venezuelans, disregarding the political, position of each of us. I mean, there are anti-Chavistas that have publicly claimed that they will join the militias if the U.S. dare to invade. So that takes me to the next step, which is what we have been doing in Venezuela to counter this, U.S. military threat. And since the very beginning, I believe that late August, President Maduro invited Venezuelans to voluntarily enlist in the militias. The militias then, the number of militia already enrolled, enlisted members enlisted in the Bolivarian militia was around 4.5 million Venezuelans. I believe that that number might be, because that number has been there like for 6 or 7 years, and I believe that that number might have get affected by the, migration crisis that we have faced in recent years. But I believe that that number, even with that, the migration effects will be close to 3.5 or 4 million Venezuelans. And after the call, in just the matter of 2 or 3 weeks, according to the numbers provided by the government, the militia member grew by 3 million additional militia people. Playing with numbers in the middle of, a military invasion is always part of the psychological warfare from each side of the, of the invasion. So I'm not saying that that the Venezuelan government figure, which is 8 million militia member, is exactly there. But I believe that it's bigger than the 4.5 million militia that we initially had. So if you ask me, I believe that our militia people should be somewhere around 6 or 7 million Venezuelans right now. And after that enlistment process, the military and the militia began joint exercises and military drills and training to prepare those militias for whatever happens. And the whole process has been held very responsibly by the military in Venezuela and by the leadership of the Bolivarian Revolution. And I admire the way that they have been communicating to us what happened. I mean, they have not been hiding the risk of military invasion or U.S. strike against Venezuela, but they have also asked us not to get into panic, not to get into paralyzation, which is part of the psychological warfare launched from the U.S. And when you see the street of Venezuela, the streets of Caracas, which are the ones that I see the most, because I live here, you don't see a paralyzation of Venezuela. In the contrary, you see the country as always, people going to work, people doing their things, people doing groceries without panic, and everything is running as expected for this time of the year, which is the season of the year where you see most of the economic activity. So there is no paralyzation, but there is Venezuelans are in alert, but not paralyzed. And one important thing that I have to say is that the militia, what we call the Bolivarian militia, are not those militias, crazy militias that you have up there in Michigan or Indiana, shooting in the middle of the forest or wanting to invade Washington because they oppose the federal government. The Bolivarian militia is is one branch of the Venezuelan army. And in that sense, it's not something inorganic or the way the U.S. mainstream media try to portray it, like if Maduro is, giving away, rifles to everyone, and distributing weapons to anyone that pass by to defend Venezuela. I mean, it's an organized institution part of the armed force, and that is the result of years of an important military doctrine created, implemented by President Chavez before he died, and 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 he basically embraced the war of all people, Mao's approach to national defense. And in that sense, since the very first day when Chavez took office, he promoted this thing that we call in Venezuela military civilian unity. So that is extremely important for people to understand, because if you are not in Venezuela, you might not see it clearly. But basically, what President Chavez and now President Maduro tried to do was like, do not create this artificial division between the military and regular, ordinary people, which is something that happened in most countries around the world, because that's the best way to have the army to repress its country in the case of an emergency. So Hugo Chavez saw in a different approach of fusioning the military with the ordinary people, because he believed that the military was part of the ordinary people, and that the ordinary people should be also part of the military. So that has been happening here in Venezuela for already more than 2 decades, and that level of unity exists. And what I'm trying to tell you is that what we have seen in recent days with this training and military drills is amazing. We have seen militia people. But I want to say that along with the military and the militia, the communes has been taking part in this recent exercise to strengthen the military readiness of the country in face of U.S. aggression. So we have seen militia people and communal ordinary Venezuelans that just enroll in the militia, participating in military drills and going to the barracks and the military forts and doing military training. But also we have seen military people going to the communes and training in the communes ordinary Venezuelans and militia people in the place where they live. And that has been happening since August. And I believe that that's part of what I say that I believe is extremely important in terms of the responsible way in which Venezuelan has been, organizing the country to prevent or to respond to a U.S. military threat. So I believe that this exercise have created an additional strength in the Bolivarian Revolution among Chavismo, because it has connected these three important institutions for us, which is the military, of course, the militia, and the communes, and along with that, several, legal framework has been approved, passed in recent weeks to strengthen more in a better way this connection, this unity. And also President Maduro announced, and not too much people have been talking about lately, but just at the beginning of this mess in August or September, President Maduro announced that he prepared an emergency decree in case of a U.S. attack. So Venezuela is ready, and the government has announced that in the case of a U.S. attack, an emergency constitutional exemption decree is already pre-approved. And the Venezuela government said that in the case of a U.S. strike against Venezuela, that emergency decree will be activated, And that means that in the case of a U.S. military strike, maybe the U.S. revolution is going to move into a new stage, and a more radical stage. Trying to get to advance faster in the way we envision building a socialist society, but also getting rid of the enemies, if you ask me. So, I mean, we have many enemies inside Venezuela. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there is a concrete actions taken by the government in the real, scenario, but also there are legal actions and that will be implemented in the case of a U.S. military attack. So I believe that I have talked too much already, and I just wanna leave it to you to make your questions, guys. Sorry for taking so long.
It hasn't been long at all. Thank you so much, Jesus. We will have questions and answers, a discussion, a comradely discussion after a few brief announcements. And we just like to let you know that you can ask your questions or make your comments by raising your hand. And to do that in Zoom, you click on the reactions button and then raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please keep your questions short. I don't know if we have somebody to help time 2 minutes, or well, we'll figure that out. Ask one question at a time to allow everyone to participate, and please do keep in mind that this is a comradely forum. Please show respect for other participants and the moderator. Now, let me just briefly go over what's coming here at ICSS, and you can find more information at icssmarks.org on November 23rd. Next Sunday, we'll have Dan Kowalik come talk to us about the history and current aggression of the U.S. against Colombia and Venezuela. Dan has just come back from Colombia, having met with the families of the fishermen who have been victims of U.S. aggression recently, as well as having met with President Petro. And perhaps that will be a question for our guest today, the connection between Colombia and Venezuela. And well, we'd like to remind you to sign up for email notifications for our programs at icssmarks.org and donate if you can. Send us feedback there. You can also view past presentations of the forum at icssmarks.org and on our YouTube channel. All right, let's see. We have one hand so far, and I guess I'll call on Freddie, but let me first make sure that participants are allowed to unmute. 1 second. All right, Freddie, go ahead, followed by Peter.
Thank you, comrade, for your presentation. I want to just make two quick comments, and then I have a question. Just that I think we need to all remember that the Democratic Party is in on this, along with the Republican Party. Obama was the one that declared Venezuela a threat to the U.S. national security. And also another comment that it's clear that Venezuela is not making the mistakes of Allende in Chile in the 70s in terms of the way they're mobilizing their population. And this is my question. Given that Russia and China, in my estimation, have not done enough in terms of cutting trade with Israel to help end the genocide in Palestine, and given Russia's embrace of the terrorist jihadist al-Jolani, can Venezuela count on the support of Russia and China? And what sort of support can be expected? Because I think a lot of us are feeling, as you mentioned, the U.S. is trying to assert itself in the Western Hemisphere. Some of us are concerned that there may be some sort of quid pro quo, that Russia and China will have their sphere of influence in the East, whereas the U.S. will be allowed to have their sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere.
Thank you for the questions, Freddy. Yes, I mean, that's a question of, we say in Venezuela, the hard to answer question. I mean, I believe that the military alliance that we have seen in the 21st centuries are way different than the one we saw in the 20th or the 19th century. So we don't expect, I don't expect, and I believe that the Venezuelan government and the Bolivarian Revolution do not expect to have, Russian or Chinese warships of, or troops coming to Venezuela to defend Venezuela. We have to do it ourselves. And I believe that is important for people outside Venezuela to know that. But I'm pretty sure that despite not expecting Chinese or Russian troops or Iranian troops in Venezuela, we will have military support from those countries. In a covert way, which usually happens in situations like this. And Russia, if you ask me, is one of the countries that has been more outspoken about what is happening right now in the Caribbean. I didn't talk too much about that, but we have to mention that since September 2nd, the U.S. Southcom have killed 79 civilians in the Caribbean in 20 strikes. Under something that the United Nations itself has labeled as extrajudicial killings. But anyway, going back to your question, Russia in the recent week or two, for the last 2 weeks, has been making almost daily statements about Venezuela and against the U.S. military operations. So that somehow make me here in Venezuela feel a little bit relieved, because we know that the Russians are really paying attention to what is happening. The Chinese have not made the same level of a statement as the Russians, but we know the Chinese diplomacy is very different from the Russian diplomacy. So that doesn't mean that I don't expect China to support us in the case of a military confrontation or a military attacks from the U.S. So in that sense, I believe that you are right. In terms of, we don't expect the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians to solve our problems. We are counting on the strength of our people. But we have these allies, and I believe that Russia and China, Iran and other countries that we consider allies will jump in and try to help us somehow to deal, against these aggressions. Potential aggressions, I mean.
Thanks. Peter, go ahead. Followed by Lucy, then Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks, Jesus. That was very interesting. And when you talked about, military options for the United States, of course, I 100% agree that they have a need now. Once they've made a commitment, they now have to show something for their commitment. They have to pretend that, they are accomplishing something, which, the United States has a long history of, and I've seen it, of course, in my time. I remember demonstrating against the invasion of Panama. There wasn't a whole lot of us back in those days who protested, but me and my 6-month-old daughter were some of them. And then Grenada, of course. But even there, I think the U.S. military certainly is in a very different position today than it was in the 80s when they had both those incursions. The military is far less adept at any kind of military operations. They certainly can do, I agree that they have these kind of airstrikes, which I expect will be their go-to solution, which always seems to be the case. But I'm wondering, when you say, they'll try and do some kind of a strike against missile strikes and that kind of thing. What is the anticipated? I'm not sure. I don't care really about the military response in that Venezuela would give. But what do you suppose will be the target? Do you actually expect Caracas to be the target, or simply all the military bases outside along the coast that are not in population centers? And I agree with you that I can't see U.S. troops landing. That'd be insane before the elections anyway. But do you see, in terms of military strikes, do you see this on oil facilities, on defense facilities, on government buildings? What's the defensive posture that Venezuela can put up to these potential strikes?
Yes, I believe that in terms of the targets, I am pretty sure that those targets will be in Caracas, if you ask me, especially against government infrastructure. I mean, thinking about Miraflores Palace, the Venezuelan equivalent to the White House, where the president lives, or some military forts, bases here in Caracas, like La Carlota or like Fuerte Tiuna. I'm pretty sure that they are going to try to strike those facilities and claim that they were trying to kill the leadership of the Cartel de los Soles. That's basically what the U.S. are going to say in this regarding if they are successful or not killing Chavista leadership or trying to destroy defensive, equipment. And they will say that it was an amazing success and astroturfing successful strike, and that eliminated the Cartel de los Soles, which never existed, by the way. So that's the way I see it, and I live close to the headquarters of the National Guard. So sometimes I'm afraid that one of those missiles might deviate a few meters from the target and might striking where I live. So it's complicated, the situation. And in terms of the defense, the way I see it is that if the U.S. launched this, missile strike or airstrike against Venezuela, the Venezuelan defense that is mostly, made out of Russian equipment, which is not bad equipment, which is very good and very threatening defensive equipment like the S-300 missile systems, or there are other systems that I'm not familiar with, but that experts says that are very good. So Venezuela, I believe that we will try to utilize those defense systems. Actually, last week with the arrival of this aircraft carrier to the Caribbean, Venezuela launch a continuation of these military drills that we call Independence 200, and a lot of military equipment, defensive equipment, missile defensive equipment was deployed. And that takes me to something important that I forgot to mention, which is part of what I say that is the responsible way in which, our leadership has deal with this military threat. Which is that you don't see military all over Caracas or military equipment deployed, missile systems or whatever deployed everywhere. I mean, the government has been trying to do all of this without trying to disrupt in the least possible way, the daily, the way we do things, our daily lives. But last week, there was an important deployment of military equipment because it's imminent that the U.S. is planning something. And also in recent days, some people say weeks, GPS signals have been jammed all over Venezuela. And first, I believe that I first hear of that last week, and people say that it was close to the shore, to the border with Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the east side of Venezuela. But but yesterday I have a very old card that I use only like once every 2 weeks. And yesterday I used the card, and the GPS, signal was also not working. Usually the signal, GPS signal, at least here in Caracas, with that GPS, with that device that I use, usually picks like between 8 and 10 satellites. And for the last 2 or 3 days, is picking 0 satellites. So when I saw that, I connected with that news that I was reading a few weeks ago, the one that I mentioned about what has been happening with jammed GPS signals in the east of Venezuela, and I began to realize that the GPS jamming, a scene is happening also in Caracas. But anyway, I mean, I believe that I answered your question. I believe that we are ready to respond. And I believe that the targets are the ones that I mentioned. They're going to try to get rid of the leadership of Chavismo, as you asked me, which is not going to be very successful because first, I believe that Chavismo has been trying to be prepared for whatever scenarios. But also because if something happens against our leadership, there will be a new generation of Chavista leaders that will take on, regain the leadership of the movement. Lucy.
Yes, Lucy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Jesus. Thank you so much. I loved your presentation, and it was very informative, and it's very reassuring. I wanted to ask you about the countries around Venezuela, like Colombia and Brazil, and let me see, there's Mexico. Mexico is also under attack, although not as direct as it is with you guys, but then there is Honduras también, ¿verdad? And
Yes.
which other country? But there's many of them, and I'm sure that they're trying to make an example, kind of like if you try to rebel, this is what's going to happen to you, or something like that. They might just go for a smaller target, like I would think Colombia is a little weaker in that respect, because even though Petro is coming out very militant, I don't think he's ready for an attack. And if they did do that, would Venezuela help Colombia?
I mean, going to the first parts of the question, it's completely true that the whole escalation is not only at this level. It's not only targeting Venezuela,
Right.
and especially because President Petro in Colombia has been very outspoken against these U.S. military extrajudicial killings in the region, especially after one national of Colombia was killed in one of these strikes and another one survived. So since then, President Petro but before that, he was already outspoken a critic of the deployment and made very strong statement about the unity in the region. And he has been calling for to rethink the Gran Colombia project, which is what Simón Bolívar created, which is this country that was comprehended. I mean that was formed by what is now Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, and Venezuela. So he has been pushing that a lot in recent days. I'm pretty sure that the U.S. is targeting Mexico also. Actually, last Thursday, when President Trump said he kind of made up his mind on Venezuela, he mentioned Colombia and Mexico precisely, saying that he said something like the threat, the drugs, the volume of drugs has been reduced a lot because of what is happening, but there is still problems with Mexico and Colombia, something like that, he said. So I believe that Mexico and Colombia are targets or potential targets in an expansion of this crazy military tirade in the region. I believe that it will, in the case of the U.S. Decide to invade or launch military strikes in a systematic way against Venezuela, I'm pretty sure that we are going to receive the support of Colombians. I'm not saying that the Colombian army will enter Venezuela and launch, military defensive operations with the Venezuelan army. I don't see it that way. But I'm pretty sure that many Colombians and many military people in Colombia will somehow help us. And I believe that if something happened in the country against Colombia and Mexico, we will try to help those countries also in a very similar way. Again, I don't see, because the nature of, military conflicts in recent decades has changed. So I don't see those military alliances that we saw in the 20th century, rebirthing or whatever. But as I say, it will be there will be some sort of connection, some sort of support and alliances not very visible that will allow us to help each other. Actually, one of these ways is this initiative that I believe that is extremely important. That is the what we call the international brigades. And a lot of solidarity people from all over the world has been saying that in the case of a military attack against Venezuela or a military invasion against Venezuela, they will come to Venezuela to defend Venezuela. And I believe that's a very powerful solidarity tool, not only to raise our spirit here in Venezuela, because it does, but also to show a signal to the oligarchs everywhere that solidarity and international brigades are real options to support Venezuela or Colombia or Mexico. So I believe that that's part of the solidarity equation. I hope that I answered your question, Lucy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie is next. If you could unmute, followed by Janet, and then I don't know is it Filipa or Philippa. Thank you. Filipa.
I think.
All right,
yes.
thank you. Jesus, I wondered, two things. You don't seem to think that oil installations in Venezuela will be a target of U.S. airstrikes, and I wonder why that is. And the second is, just what is the involvement of the IDF, either the Israeli Defense Force, both in cooperation with the U.S. threats and with the Venezuelan so-called opposition? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. The thing around the military, the oil facilities or key infrastructure, civilian infrastructure attacks, I don't see them very viable because they might affect U.S. plan on the day after, Actually, the U.S. Main goals is try to have control of the oil from Venezuela, and if they attack that, it's going to be hard to begin extracting oil in the improbable case of a U.S. occupation of Venezuela or something. So that's why I don't see it very possible. That doesn't mean that the U.S. cannot do it. Of course, the U.S. can do whatever they want. They can launch a nuclear bomb on us if they go crazy enough. But they don't need it, because they, despite their craziness, they have a few people that sing on the day after. So that's why I don't see that like a possibility. The last part of the question was about what I forgot.
Okay, the extent of the Israeli Defense Forces or the
Exactly.
state of
Okay.
Israel.
Okay. Yes, I remember. I mean, the Israeli, the Zionists are everywhere. And they have a lot of support from the Venezuelan far right. And Maria Corina Machado is an admirer of Netanyahu, and an admirer of the Likud party. So the connection between far right Venezuelans, the U.S. that is the puppeteer, and the Zionist regime is there, exist. I don't see them exactly, invading us or doing something directly, but indirectly they will be there, of course.
Janet, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Jesus. So many questions, but I'll ask two. Similar to what Lucy asked, the U.S. has also been attacking Colombia, Venezuela's neighbor, and Colombia's President Gustavo Petro for drug trafficking, so-called, as well as for President Petro's UN General Assembly Uniting for Peace proposal to end the genocide in Gaza, which would include a protection force consisting of dedicated military from non-complicit countries, and which competes with Trump's UN Security Council draft proposal that combines his colonial 20-point plan on Gaza and the International Stabilization Force, ISF, from the French-Saudi New York Declaration. The ISF would consist of UN blue helmets, not unlike those in Haiti. How do you see the U.S. aggression against Colombia over Gaza as part of that against Venezuela? And has Venezuela considered becoming a sponsor of Petro's Uniting for Peace draft resolution? My second question, what role do you think the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to Maria Corina Machado is playing in all this, possibly to prompt a color revolution in Venezuela?
Thank you, Janet. I mean, President Petro has been very critical of Venezuela, especially since last year's election. And he calls himself a progressive. But in my opinion, the circumstances has been pushing him to realize that Venezuela is a natural ally. And in that sense, I believe that that's somehow explain his radicalization in recent months. But that radicalization don't comes with comments from time to time that, in my opinion, seems to be trying to be sympathetic with the forces being with the empire. Not the U.S. maybe, but European forces also. So I mean, one have to understand that Petro is not Hugo Chavez, for example. Despite he being a very progressive guy, especially taking into consideration the nature of the Colombian political system. He is the first progressive president that Colombia has in its history. So I mean, what I'm trying to tell you is that President Petro needs to be understood, within this framework. He is also being about to transfer the baton to a new president next year. One have to consider that. and maybe Ivan Cepeda will be the next president that is from within his forces, will be the next president of Colombia. I hope so. I mean, we have to understand that context in order to think about President Petro's recent actions. But the way I see it, I admire the way Petro has been doing that, despite my criticism to some of his statements against Venezuela and the way uh, uh, we deal with our far-right opposition that behaves very differently than normal far-right politicians in the region, and in that way needs to be approached in a different way than I believe that Colombia is worse than here, but in other countries, just to not to enter into specifics. But what I'm trying to say is that I like the way President Petro spoke in the United Nations in New York a few weeks ago, and I believe that Venezuela is sympathetic to this idea of creating a multinational force, but Venezuela always acts with caution against some initiatives of President Petro because of what I told you. Because we believe that he still hears voices from people that are not pretty, Marxist, socialist-minded people. No, so he tried to balance himself a little bit within the forces being, and in our opinion, that's not enough because you have to call things by their names. And trying to be in the middle of the road between empire and socialism most of the time don't bring good things. And we have experienced this in Venezuela, and that's why we have radicalized in recent years, and not because we are not diplomatic or we are more aggressive or radical than others, but circumstances have pushed Venezuela towards a different path. So I hope that I answered your question. I see Venezuela sympathetic with that initiative. I'm not sure if Venezuela will officially join a multinational force, but Venezuela has been, despite that, very outspoken against the genocide in Gaza. Venezuela cut relations with Israel a long time ago. We don't have diplomatic relations with that country since. I don't remember exactly when. I believe it was 2009 or 2013, something like that. So we don't have any sort of diplomatic relations, trade relations with Israel since then. Of course, in recent years, because of the genocide, Colombia's decision of cutting diplomatic ties with Israel was very news, and no one talks too much about Venezuela, but no one talks too much about Venezuela because we already cut those ties long time ago. So anyway, the last part of the question was about what that I forget?
So it was about the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, about Maria Corina Machado. Yes, I got it.
Revolution.
I mean, it is connected to the Zionist movement, if you ask me. It also is the timing of this, the awarding of this prize is very, it says a lot. I mean, many saw it like an encouraging of the U.S. operation, the U.S. deployment and the U.S. military aggression in the region, in order to create the illusion that there is this movement in Venezuela supporting Maria Corina Machado, which is a big lie. I mean, Maria Corina Machado is not even supported by far-right Venezuelans, despite what you hear out there. She is one of the most polarized figures within the far-right Venezuela, which is already very far-right, but she is in the extreme right of the far-right Venezuelans. And in that sense, she's seen by many of those far-right forces as a threat, as a division agent. And that's what has been happening with the Venezuelan opposition in recent months because of the radical stance that she takes. Every time after the award, she has been, giving speeches everywhere, showing the world how sold out she is, how warmongering she is, and how she believe or he's trying to make people outside Venezuela, because she mostly do speeches in English because she doesn't have a Venezuelan audience. She has been trying to show the world how she will run the country when the gringos get rid of Chavismo, something that is not going to happen. So and also talking about her and thinking about the Nobel Peace Prize, when you hear the speech of the spokesperson of the Norway, the Norway committee that awarded her the prize, you notice how far right that organization is, and how they try to portray her like the heroine. The leader that is in the height in Venezuela. She has been trying to portray herself like a very heroic figure because she is in Venezuela in the height and no one knows where she is, allegedly. And she is, for that reason, so heroic. And the truth is that the Venezuelan government knows where she is. The same way that the Venezuelan government knew where Juan Guaido was before her. And the Venezuelan government strategy towards those far-right figures since Hugo Chavez's time is that to let them rot in themselves. And that's the strategy with Maria Corina Machado too. And despite them being criminals, because they have committed crimes, it's better to let them be free, because that way they will self-destroy themselves eventually. But it's important to highlight how the Norway committee talk about Maria Corina Machado heroism, and because she is in the high, that's something that is a stupidity, if you ask me.
Next, we'll hear from Philippa, followed by Richard, and then Rich Johnson. Rich J.
Oh, thank you very much for your presentation, Jesus. I really appreciate it. Just wanted to add to this that the United States strikes countries that own their resources, in particular Libya, Syria, Iraq, where the state owns and manages its oil wealth. So clearly this is another reason, obviously the biggest reason probably, why the US has got its sights set on Venezuela. So I was just wondering how, with the sanctions on the oil reserves, on the oil wealth in the oil trade in Venezuela, how has Venezuela managed to ensure that the profits still, are diverted to social services that help the poor, as it has been doing? And that's the reason why the US is going to go in there and change this whole. They want to change this whole state ownership of resources going to the people.
Yes, Felipe. The sanctions that began after the Obama executive order declaring Venezuela an extraordinary threat to U.S. national security has impacted Venezuela a lot. They began in a harder way in 2008, since 2017, if you ask me. And they targeted mostly our oil industry, PDVSA. And PDVSA represent like 80 or 90% of the income that Venezuela receives. So some Venezuelan government figures said that from 2000, the revenue in 2020, the foreign currency revenue of the country in 2020, if you compare it with 2019, only represented 10% of the previous year of 2019. So just to give you an idea, if in your house, your salary is cut from $10,000 to $1,000, you are going to be in big trouble. And that's what happened in Venezuela. That exacerbated an already economic crisis that we were living since 2014 or 15. The dramatic consequence of the U.S. sanctions, no one can deny it. And Venezuela has been one of the countries that have received most of the sanctions in recent years. We are, I believe, in the top 5 or top 10, countries sanctioned by the U.S. Right now. The effects has been terrible, especially at the beginning, because no country is prepared to receive that level of attacks. But after a few years, Venezuela began to find ways to circumvent these sanctions. And we found those ways precisely because the U.S. is now not in control of the whole world. And for that reason, our alliances with Russia, with China, with India, with Iran, and with Turkey allow us to bypass U.S. sanctions. And since 2020, I believe, the Venezuelan economy has been recovering. We have recorded positive GDP growth since 2020 until today, without exemptions, without pause. Every single quarter, there has been economic growth in Venezuela. It is nothing compared with what we had before 2013. Actually, let me tell you something. In 2013, the GDP of Venezuela was somewhere around $300,000 million. In 2019, that GDP was 75% less. That means was around 75 million, 70,000 million dollars. So that's to give you an idea how big the economic crisis and the sanctions affected Venezuela. With this economic growth that we have been facing in recent years, the GDP, I believe that the last figure I saw of the GDP was around 120,000 million. So it's way better than 2019, but it's still less than half of the size of the economy that we had in 2013. So we can say proudly that we have been learning how to circumvent sanctions, that we have been learning how to make the economy grow despite sanctions, but we are still very affected by, the sanctions and everything that happens in recent years. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Jesus. We'll hear from Richard. Go ahead with your question, Richard Wright.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a nice little presentation. My question has to do with this, and that is that there's been some discussion out there that Trump, in particular, I hate to put a face to or name that name or whatever, because it's actually bipartisan. Is basically implementing a new version of the Monroe Doctrine, in which he first off he attacks and presumably overthrows the government in Venezuela for a more favorable government in South America, and secondly, that he then goes on to, or actually I said we then go on. To extend that to Nicaragua and Cuba and et cetera, et cetera. And that the U.S. position in this is to basically supply weapons, to build and sell weapons, to not only build obviously for this, but also to sell to Western European for their own spheres of influence. And in against contra Russia, if you will, as well as against China. Ultimately, I believe against China. Could you maybe elaborate on that? Do you buy that thesis, or do you have any comments on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Yes, that's exactly what I tried to explain at the beginning of my words. I mean, this new geopolitical configuration of the world is forcing the US to relaunch. Some people have called about Monroe Doctrine 2.0 or Monroe Doctrine Reloaded or Monroe Doctrine with asteroids. But it's basically that. I mean, the US is trying to exercise or regain control of the region that they consider their backyard with quotations. So it's undeniable. And that's why I mentioned all these things that at the beginning many of us saw that were unconnected and crazy, which was the Greenland thing, the Canadian thing, the Gulf of Mexico thing, the Panama Canal thing, and we believe that Trump was crazy. But right now, it makes more sense than ever. I mean that is part of this, regain control of the hemisphere that the U.S. has envisioned for several hundred years. So that's completely true. And in terms of the connection, I mean the initiative, like an exercise of U.S. I mean, like an attempt from the U.S. to exercise control of the region and then cut China and Russia. That's also part of the thing that I mentioned, which is completely true. I mean, they are trying most directly to expel China from the region because China has become the main trade partner with most of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, except for Mexico, for obvious reason, because of the free agreement that they have with the US and Canada, and with Colombia, that I believe that if the progressive governments remain in Colombia, Colombia soon will kick the U.S. from from the main trade partner with Colombia. So yes, of course, there's a geopolitical dispute, and weapons are part of that geopolitical dispute. Weapons are an extremely important part of the U.S. economy, and that's why the U.S. pushes countries all over the world to buy the weapons, despite those weapons not being the most advanced or the most effective. I actually believe that most of the Russian equipment, military equipment, is better than the U.S. equipment, and we have seen that in the conflict in Ukraine. With all these alarms of German tanks and U.S. Planes and U.S. missiles and whatever, and whenever they are installed in Ukraine, those things do not last more than a few days or weeks. So yes, I mean that's part of the confrontation.
Excellent. We'll hear from Rich, followed by Judith. Just a reminder that we have about 15 minutes left. If our guest is available to stay a couple of minutes more, we'll try to take all the questions. If Jesus has to go, well, then that's
Yes,
the
I'm
case.
okay. I'm okay with
Great.
that.
But we'll try to finish on time and we're as close to on time as possible. But please keep your questions short if possible. Thank you. Rich.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for this talk. I'm going to say something that sounds kind of funny in a way, but your presentation was very clear. I don't
Thank you.
really mean mainly that your English is great, but the content of what you said was so clear and so broad and specific when it needed to be. I'm really impressed, and I'll say it. Usually someone will beat me to it from the planning committee or whatever, but I hope you can come back, and not too long from now. We're going to have to watch as things unfold. We all know we don't really know what's going to happen. It's scary as heck, but I can't say how much I appreciate your being here and helping educate us and giving us face the importance of what's happening around us. Anyway, thank you very much.
Can't
Thank you,
say
Rick.
thank you enough.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Judith, you're next. You can unmute. Judith
You
Osterman.
are muted.
You are muted, so can we come back to Judith and maybe go to Bill and Clara, and then we'll come back to Judith. Bill and Clara, you ready? Let's see.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. If not, we'll take next in line. How about Bill, go ahead, Bill. Wonderful.
Judith is next.
Oh, but Judith hasn't unmuted, so Bill, you're next. You're up. Go ahead if you're ready.
Okay. Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that the Orinoco Tribune is one of the greatest sources of truth in English language from Latin America, and I really appreciate the work you do on that website.
Thank you, Bill.
Questions have arisen about the left and the Communist Party in Venezuela and the splits and all that, and how they supported the government, how they didn't, and all that. Can you explain how that's been resolved at all? And because a lot of Marxists here in America are concerned about the anti-communist left and the communist left, and wondering what's happening with the left in Venezuela. Thank you.
Yes, it's a complex debate. Thank you for praising our work in Orinoco Tribune. We actually try to do it in the best of our capacities and with the scarce resources that we have. And for that, we always invite Compass in the US, especially because you have more money than us, to support us and to make donations to us. That's extremely important, especially right now that we are reaching our 7th anniversary. But going back to the question of the PCB, I call myself a widow of the Venezuelan PCB. I mean, I was a voter. I was not a member, but a sympathizer of Venezuelan Communist Party, and I always voted Communist Party since the leadership of the Communist Party here began to behave like a far-right party. So then since then I felt myself a little bit like an orphan, and I've been forced to vote PSUV despite some criticism that I have against the PSUV, which is the ruling party. But there are no options because the behavior of the Venezuelan Communist Party is, or what it was, I mean, because there was this whole I don't know how you say that in English, but we call it judicialización. I mean, this legal process to try to ban or take the signs and symbols of the Communist Party, the traditional historic Venezuelan Communist Party. And it was an initiative that I believe that was unnecessary, but was also a response to the erratic and almost far-right behavior or extreme left behavior of the leadership of the historic Venezuelan Communist Party that, if you ask me, was co-opted by Trotsky's factions. And for that reason, we have seen this, internal fight with the Communist Party, the historic Venezuelan Communist Party, and the PSUV and the Venezuelan government. Actually, the Communist Party, when this recent crisis began with the U.S. threatening militarily Venezuela, you could read this statement from the Communist Party opposing U.S. Foreign invasions and aggressions. I mean, they published this statement like with 6 or 7 paragraphs, and only one of those paragraphs was about opposing U.S. invasions, and the other 5 or 6 was calling Maduro a repressive authoritarian president, and that he needs to release the political, between quotations, prisoners, and repeating all the far right narratives, and you wonder if they were really trying to join most of the Venezuelan forces that has been opposing foreign invasions, or if they just use it like an excuse to keep attacking the Venezuelan government. So it's a very complicated situation. I feel myself like a Marxist, and I'm sad because the path that our Communist Party took, and I wish that eventually a real Communist Party leadership might regain control of the party, but meanwhile, I need to stick with the PSUV because that's the only way for us to keep Chavismo and the Bolivarian revolution alive. That's my honest opinion about that issue that, stresses me a lot or worries me a lot.
Jesus, thank you. Judith, you're already unmuted. Go ahead.
Yes, finally. Okay. All right. So, So the Communist Party in the United States went down the same course, and look what happened to the Soviet Union. A lot of money and effort is devoted by the imperialists to bringing communists down. So what I wanted to say was a couple of things. I don't know if you know Alexander Mackay of the British Marxist-Leninist Party, but he says that he thinks the United States is bluffing, that they don't have the manpower to invade, and it would take like hundreds of thousands of troops to invade Venezuela, but I think that the United States may have other ways of weakening the government. So I don't know what they might be, but anyway, as far as Israel is concerned, they supplied commandos for the death squads back in the 20th century, so they might be doing the same thing. So I wanted to know your opinion about whether you think the United States is able to invade, or if you know of some other way they might destabilize the government, and also in terms of neighboring countries, if any of them will be enlisted by the United States to engage in to participate in an invasion, like for instance Guyana, or I don't know, Peru, and then another thing is
Judith,
but all right, just
I
very
apologize.
quickly.
Yeah, go ahead. Just finish up
All
quickly
right.
because we have a lot of hands. Thank you.
Right. Okay, yeah. So, can you explain why Brazil voted negative to Venezuela's participation in BRICS, and can Brazil be relied upon? Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I mean, the first part of the question about the scenarios, I mentioned them at the beginning of my words, but summarizing it, I would just reiterate what I say. I mean, I believe that a military invasion is very unlikely, but airstrike or missile strike against Venezuela are very likely, and I'm pretty certain that the U.S. is planning, at least at this level, something like that. The other part of the country was about the question. Was about the
Which countries might be recruited to join the attack?
Yes, but also the question about the potential countries that might join U.S. forces in a strike or invasion against Venezuela, and that is an important one. I mean, as you say, Guyana is one of those countries that one can see as a potential beachhead for U.S. military invasion. But more clearly, we have seen in recent weeks that Trinidad and Tobago is the employee of the week for the U.S. empire, because it has been the one that has been working faster and better in recent weeks to show how submissive they are to the U.S. strategy. So Guyana is an important, beach head for a U.S. invasion, if you ask me. Actually, they are launching today new military drills just a few miles off the coast of Venezuela. With the 22nd Brigade, whatever, which is like a special forces that the U.S. has used in the Balkans and Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere to launch, thunder military operations. So they scare a lot with that brigade or whatever battalion. So we have that, and we have also Puerto Rico, which is not far away. It's a little bit farther, but it's relatively close to Venezuela, and everyone says that it's from Puerto Rico, where all this military build-up has been centralized. And you have the Aruba, Curaçao, and Bonaire that are Netherlands colonies, and they are just also as close to Venezuela as Trinidad and Tobago. And the European Union has been trying to wash their hands in this recent build-up, but we know that because of NATO, anything can happen if the U.S. decided to push NATO to allow them to use military bases. So they have military bases in those islands. So those are the countries that worry us the most, if you ask me. And in terms of Brazil, which was the other part of the question in relation to BRICS, I mean, Brazil is somehow behaves a little bit similar than Colombia. But of course, President Petro has been radicalizing his behavior in his speech recent months, as I already said. But President Lula tries to balance himself between, U.S. empire, trying to be friends with the U.S. empire, but also trying to be friends with the progressive, forces in the region. And I believe that that's a stupidity, but one has to understand also the particular circumstances of each country. So I respect the Brazilian decision of boycotting Venezuelan entrance into BRICS last year. We are already part of BRICS. I mean, in practical terms, not in formal terms. So I said in that sense. So the moment when the correlation of forces within BRICS allow it, I'm pretty sure that we will be allowed to enter BRICS. But of course, BRICS is not a panacea itself. BRICS is just a coalition of countries, important countries that right now are disputing the geopolitical, scenario with the U.S. But it is not a solution itself. It's just like a representation of how the world has changed in recent decades, but we all know that within BRICS there are a lot of contradictions and confrontations and things like that. But the fact that it exists is already a good thing for this new world that is emerging. I hope that I answered the question.
Great. Sharat is next, if you want to unmute.
Yes. So this talk and your answers have been extremely informative. Very, very much appreciate that. Before I ask my question, I just want to say that I was delighted I was just in Palestine a few weeks, just 2 weeks ago, and I was delighted to find that there is a Palestine Venezuela hospital. It's the Hugo Chavez Eye Hospital that I discovered brand new that was just built in a small town in Palestine, the town of Tomasaya. So
I didn't know about that.
yeah, it's amazing, and it was very, optimistic that Venezuela, with all the sanctions, could afford to give this aid, but tremendous solidarity in the face of adversity. My question about sanctions has already been answered, so I'll ask the other part, which is what progress has Venezuela made in recent years in terms of diversification of the economy, so that it will have the economic strength to resist the U.S. empire.
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, the 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 economy of Venezuela, as I mentioned, has been improving a lot. Sanctions has been forcing us to realize, we already knew it, but has been forcing us to move faster in a way to get rid of that dependency on oil and move towards other, economic engines for our economy. So that has been happening in recent years because of the sanctions. Actually, for the last 2 or 3 years, not the government, but the Association of Supermarket Businesses in Venezuela has been claiming that like between 90 and 95 or 96% of whatever they sold in their supermarkets is nationally made. So that's a big achievement, if you ask me, especially after 2015 and 2017 or 18, where we have these crazy issues with food and some levels of scarcity. So we have reached amazing levels of self-sufficiency in food production. We have been trying to divert from oil. It's very complex, and whenever someone asks me about that, I always try to let the people know that we didn't decide to be an oil-producing country. We actually were an agriculture country before the gringos came and forced our economy to move into the oil economy, because that's what the gringos wanted us to do, because Rockefeller wanted our oil, and he began to build and to establish oil companies in Venezuela, and that completely changed the shape of our economy in the early 20th century. So that's a reality, and some people love to criticize the oil-producing countries because they believe that we took that decision of becoming oil-producing countries, but in reality, it has been a result of imperialism and colonialism and capitalism. So in that sense, I always try to highlight that it's not an easy decision to change the path from an oil-producing country to even the allegedly successful Gulf, Persian Gulf economies that publicize themselves as success with humongous buildings and things like that. They have not been able to get rid of the dependency on oil neither, despite all the propaganda that they launch. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it's not an easy task. I was very happy. One of the things, the few things that make me happy because of the sanctions was the possibility that they allow us the possibility of getting rid faster from oil dependency. But then Biden came and somehow flexibilized the sanctions, and Chevron became again an actor in the Venezuelan oil, production economy, and so we began to regain that dependency on oil. But anyway, it's a complex issue, but I believe that we have been realizing that we need to move faster to another, economic engine. Sorry that I speak too long.
It's very informative. Thank you, Jesus. Next, we'll have, if you still have a few minutes, we have Jim. And then I apologize to those who are raising their hand for the second time. We'll take first questions. We'll take questions from people who haven't asked yet. Jim, go ahead.
So first of all, I want to invite everybody very warmly to our beloved Veterans Building for next Sunday's event. And we had a little mini class war there, which I won't take the time to explain, but we'll be glad to explain it. We beat the ruling class down, and we have more use for the working class to use our Veterans Building. That's the shorthand. Second of all, I served on a carrier. We were off the coast of Indonesia, 30 ships. There's now 15 ships around Venezuela. I think it's costing $40 million a week. That's the price I got. Perhaps 25% of U.S. naval forces. I don't know. I can't verify these figures. But Trump is in a corner. He's going to have to do something because it's costing us a lot of money. And also the Epstein files are about to be released. This might be the distraction that he uses because he is really in there deep. And so I'm very glad to hear the preparations. I love the Venezuelan Revolution. The Revolution will not be televised. It's one of my favorite movies, and I recommend it a lot. My real question, though, is China has $1 billion investment in one of the largest lakes in Venezuela. Would they allow the United States to destroy their productive capacity? $1 billion is not chump change. And so I'm really kind of wondering if China isn't saying some stuff privately to Trump, or if they're not yet strong enough. Certainly 10 years from now, because of BRICS, they will be. I hope they're strong enough now. Your comments, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That's a good point. I mean, the fact that there are Russian and Chinese interests in Venezuela very well intertwined with our economy. And in the oil industry, Russia has an important stake in oil operations in Venezuela. Not too many people talk about that because everyone believes that Russia relies on its own, oil supply, which is humongous. But also Russia has stakes in Venezuelan oil industry. An important thing that I need to highlight is that Hugo Chavez took the steps of nationalizing the whole industry, and whatever foreign company do business in Venezuela, it do it in a joint venture with PDVSA, which is the state oil company, and PDVSA has the majority of the stakes of that joint venture. What I'm trying to tell you is that even if China has operations, or Russia has operations, or Chevron has operations in the oil industry in Venezuela, the real entity that take decisions is PDVSA. In all the instances, because Venezuela is the one that has the 51% of the stakes in all those joint ventures. So that give us control of the oil operations in Venezuela also. And also another important thing that I forgot to mention. I forgot what I wanted to say. Sorry. I believe that I hope that I answered your question, but I wanted to add something that I forgot to mention, but it went out of my head. Sorry.
Thank you. And I forgot to say something as well. I wanted to ask if anybody knows how to put a flyer in the chat. There's a two to a side, a flyer that Jerry Condon sent me to get the word out about the event next Sunday. But I don't know how to put it in the chat. And so if you could email me, I'll put my email in the chat. And if not, you can get a copy from Jerry Condon, and I put his email in the chat.
Thank you, Jim. Laura, you're next. Go ahead.
The question, thank you very much. And the question that I have has to do with Hugo Chavez knew that no country could stand alone against the empire and created regional integration. And I wanted to, if you could give a quick update about some of those things. I don't think UNASUR is still happening, but ALBA and things like that, and how that has helped both Venezuela in the current circumstances and the region in terms of supporting each other and coming together rather than being picked apart one by one. Where is...
Jesus looks frozen. Let's hope that he comes back. Uh-oh, we just lost him. Okay. While Jesus is rejoining us, it's quite a few minutes past our end time. Maybe I just want to remind you, you can sign up for email notifications for our programs at icssmarks.org. And importantly, I forgot to mention at the top of the program, this event, today's forum, is part of the Week of Action, Week of Coordinated Protests, November 15th through the 23rd, with the slogans, demands no war in Venezuela, no troops on our streets. It's a broad coalition of 30 organizations or so that are calling for actions this week. United National Anti-War Coalition being one of them. And if you want more information or if you want to register an action, you can go to tinyurl.com/Venezuela-solidarity. tinyurl.com/Venezuela/solidarity for the week of actions. No war in Venezuela, no troops on our streets. Let's see if we have Jesus back. Otherwise, this might be...
Sorry, guys.
Great.
My connection got disrupted.
Okay. Jesus, do you remember Laura's question? Do you want to...
No idea. I was not able to hear it.
To hear it. Laura, go ahead. Let's do it.
Sorry.
It has to do with how Hugo Chavez, part of his very important legacy was that he created a lot of regional integration and various, like UNASUR, which I don't think is happening anymore, but ALBA and Petrocaribe and things like that. And so I'm wondering how much of an effect do you think that those things are having now with the situation in Venezuela and with the countries across the region in terms of being able to stand up against the U.S. imperialism?
Thank you, Laura. Yes, I mean, it is important to highlight that with President Chavez, there were a bunch of initiatives to strengthen Latin American and Caribbean unity. UNASUR, ALBA, TCP, Petrocaribe, CELAC itself. The only institution, if you want to call it like that, but it still needs a lot of institutionality that remains, is CELAC, because the U.S. punched those initiatives very hard, especially during Biden times, if you ask me. They managed to destroy UNASUR, to destroy Petrocaribe, and they systematically work on that publicly. You can Google around and you will find all the statements by Obama and by then Biden to try to dismantle those initiatives that were launched under Chavez time, but with the leadership of President Nicolás Maduro, that was President Chavez's foreign affairs minister. So President Maduro was in part responsible also of those amazing initiatives. So right now, CELAC and ALBA TCP are the only institutions that remain. CELAC has been doing important things. Actually, a few days ago, there was this CELAC European Union Summit in Colombia, and currently President Petro is the pro tempore president of the CELAC. And a few weeks ago, the CELAC posted this letter signed by most of the Latin American countries worrying about the escalation of the U.S. in the region. And in the summit, that's almost that same letter was somehow ratified in the final declaration of this summit that I mentioned that happened in Santa Marta, and even more countries signed it, despite that final declaration being very controversial because these U.S. puppet governments in the region did not sign many of their clauses. And the fact is that more countries signed the clause that referred to the, being worried about Latin America not being respected as a zone of peace and being worried about the U.S., military operations in the Caribbean. So in that sense, it is still there, very weakened, if you ask me. There's a lack, but it's at least it's something that we have to defend ourselves of U.S. imperial aggressions. I hope that I answer your question.
Thank you. Folks, I feel that we are abusing of the time of our guest. We've kept him past a quarter of the hour past, so I will apologize to those of you who weren't able to ask your questions. We do need to wrap it up. Jesus, if you're interested in maybe leaving contact information for those who may have questions, might want to check in with you, if you can be so kind, that would be
Yes,
wonderful.
I will write it in the chat.
Excellent. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining this Sunday morning at the Marxist Forum. Again, our website is icssmarx.org, where you can register to receive weekly email announcements, and also take a look. There's a coffee cup. That's our Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can also make a donation to support our programs. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.